Okay, so I'm going to do an introduction to the EV3. First, we'll go over what we'll need for this webinar. What we'll need is, of course, the standard educator vehicle, so the standard robot, as well as the ultrasonic sensor, a mounted touch sensor, as well, and finally the color sensor pointing downwards. We'll also need a computer, the download cable, which connects your computer to your brick, and of course the EV3 brick, which should be on the vehicle, on the robot. First, let's take a look at the EV3 brick. You'll notice on one end, that there are numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are for your sensors. So when you connect your sensors with a wire, you plug them into your brick in one of the ports. I would suggest putting the touch sensor on port 1, the color sensor on port 3, and the ultrasonic sensor on port 4. If you look on the other side of the brick, there are motor ports. So these are for motors A, B, C, and D, as well as a separate port named PC, which is where you're going to plug in your USB cable. Once you turn on your brick by pressing the middle button, you'll notice that you'll see a screen like the one. There is the Run Recent tab. At the very top of your brick, you will see the name of your brick, which you can change either in the program or in settings. So to maneuver to really use the brick, you need to use the arrow keys. So the right, left, up, down, and in the middle, the dark gray button is for selecting. There's also a back button on the top right. This one is useful when you're running a program and all of a sudden you realize something went wrong and you want to stop it. You press the back button and that will stop your program. One more thing is the download cable. So the download cable is what allows you to connect your computer to the EV3 brick. You plug the USB side into your computer, and the other side, the smaller end, goes into the PC port on the EV3 brick. And this will allow your computer to communicate with the EV3. So with that in mind, we'll now move on to the actual EV3 programming software. So once you open the LEGO Mindstorms programming software, you'll see a page like so. The first thing we need to do is to create a new project, which will then be a place where we can add programs. So to add a project, we first click the plus button, the dark gray plus button on the top. This has now created a project for us, as well as a program. If you want to rename the project, you'll have to save it. So we'll have to go to File, Save Project As. We can then give it a name. We'll give it a name and we'll click Save. So that's how we'll name our project. And you can also rename the programs by double clicking and typing in a name. And you'll also notice that there is this big white box in the way. If you don't want that there, we just have to click the black book to close the content editor. By clicking the black book in the top right corner, it is now closed and you have more room to program. I'll now be going back to a project that I have created beforehand. So on my project, you'll notice that in the top right corner where the big white box is that there's a photo, and that's what our goal is and what we're trying to achieve in our program with some descriptions. So if we look down at the first bar, if you look down, there's going to be a green bar, and that's for the action blocks. So the action blocks are used for anything that has to do with moving the robot, playing sounds, display, or brick buttons. The first block is the media motor. So this is used to control one media motor, which looks just like the icon. And the second is the one large motor. So you're controlling just only one motor. The next two are used to control two motors, so like the wheels on your robot. The first one is the move steering. It has two motors as well as the steering wheel for move steering. The one beside it, there's two motors again, and this time it's called move tank, and there are two sliders for the different speeds. Following that, there's the display. Next is the sound, and finally the brick status light, so the lights on your brick. I will start by teaching you how to use the move steering block. So all we have to do is drag it out and attach it to the play button in our program. Once you attached it, you'll notice that on the top right of the block, there's B plus C. These are the ports which I've mentioned earlier on where you're plugging in the motors. So here, my left motor is plugged in on port B, and my right motor is plugged in on port C. We can also, and since this block is move steering, we have an arrow, which is named steering. So this arrow is like the steering wheel on your car. If you want to go straight, you leave the steering wheel point straight and it's pointing forward. If I wanted to turn right, I turn my steering wheel to the right. So I can drag the slider to the right, and you'll notice that the arrow is now pointing to the right. And if I pull it further, the arrow turns more, and less, the arrow is not as sharp. So if the numbers are positive, that means that my robot will turn to the right. And if I put it to the negatives, so to the left. So when the numbers are negative, it goes to the left. I want to go straight, so I can type in the number 0. Next is the speed, or the power. So by default, it's put at power 50. If you want the robot to go faster, you can drag the slider up or type in any number up to 100, which is full power. And if I want to go backwards, I go into the negatives. So minus power, and you'll notice that the arrow is now pointing downwards, which shows you that your robot is moving backwards. I want to go forward at maybe, let's say, half power, so I'll type in 50. And that is my power. Next is the rotations. So one wheel rotation is when the motor on your robot turns one time. If I want to go further, I can change the number of rotations, for example, 3. One more thing to notice on this block is that there's also a brake, but more importantly is on the bottom left of the block. If you click there are multiple choices for you to choose from. By default, it is on rotations. However, you can also go on for degrees. So once again, the degrees is not the degree that your robot turns to. So if I want to turn 90 degrees, I don't put in 90. The degrees is actually the motor rotation. So the motor turns 90 degrees. As well as for seconds. So seconds is basically time. I would not suggest using seconds when trying to accomplish other challenges or tasks, because once you speed up the robot or slow it down, then you'll have to change everything to fit due to this. It will take shorter amount of time if it's faster. Seconds are useful when you're, for example, if you want to align with the wall by going backwards, because once your robot is against the wall, it might get stuck and the wheels cannot turn. Once the wheels don't turn to the amount of rotations that it needs, the program will get stuck and will not be able to move on. You can also just turn the motors on and turn the motors off. I'm going to go for rotations. So that's how we use the move steering block. If you have a robot, you can connect your robot to your computer by using the download cable. And to run your program, you simply press the play button and the orange start block. So now I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes to try out the program and test it out on your robot.
So if you have a robot and a laptop, feel free to create this program and then download it as Christy suggested. We're going to do this a few times, so she's going to teach a little bit, and then we're going to give you a chance to actually try it, and then we'll come back. So just for some entertainment factor, I'm going to play a little Jeopardy music for you, and when the Jeopardy music stops, Christy will start again. All right, that was a pretty easy one, so we only gave you less than a minute on that one.
All right, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to start using the sensors. So the first sensor we're going to use is the touch sensor. So to create a new program, all you have to do is click the light gray plus button and create a new program. This will give you a new program to start with, and so that way you don't have to delete the blocks, but you have a separate program to keep yourself organized. So for the touch sensor, once again, we need to move our robot forward. Other than the move steering block, there's also the move tank block, which I mentioned earlier. The move tank block has 2 sliders, and that's for the power. So if I drag out the tank block and attach it to the play button, we'll see that there's no more arrow, but instead there are 2 powers, and then as well as the rotation. So the 2 powers, so the second one is on the right motor. Once again, the motors are plugged in depending on the port, so make sure your motors are plugged in on B and C. So the left motor on B and the right motor on C. Now we're going to, instead of going on for a certain amount of rotations, this time we're just going to turn the robot on, because we don't know when, so that way the robot will keep going until the touch sensor is pressed. So at the bottom left corner of the block, we'll click the bottom left, and we're going to go to on. So we're going to click on, and you'll notice that there's no more rotation, just the power. Our next block is the wait block. It is under the orange tab in the EV3 programming software. It is the second block and the one with the hourglass on it. Once you drag that out, you notice that this wait block is for time, and we're not waiting for time. We're waiting for the touch sensor. So we're going to click the bottom left again, and we're going to go down to the touch sensor. Compare the state. Now you'll notice that once again in the top right corner, there is the port again. So here my touch sensor is plugged in on port 1. If you want to change this, you can click it and select the port where you have plugged in your touch sensor. You know that you're waiting for the touch sensor, as there's an icon, a picture of the touch sensor beside the hourglass. And next to that, you find the state. If you click on the one, you'll notice there's 0, 1, and 2. 0 is when the button is released. 1 is for when the button is pressed. And 2 is for when the button is bumped. So press and release. I'm gonna go with pressed, so number 1. So at the moment, my code has drive my motors forward at 50 speed in a straight line while I am waiting for the touch sensor to be pressed. Once the touch sensor is pressed, I don't want my robot to keep on running, so I need to get it to stop. So once again, I will go to my action blocks, the one in the green tab, and I'm gonna drag out one of the moving blocks that controls 2 motors. For example, the move. The wait block is waiting for the ultrasonic sensor to read and get the a moving block, for example, move steering, doesn't matter which one, and I'm going to turn the motors off. So once again, by clicking the bottom left, and turning it off. So this is the program to use the ultrasonic sensor. If you ever get lost, if you look on the right side there is a box which shows and explains what we need to have in our program. So once again, we can take a minute or two to test out the program on the robot that we have by plugging it in using the download cable and pressing the play button.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to the color sensor. So that's the last sensor that I'm gonna go over today. The color, once again, you can create a new program and make sure that your color sensor is pointing downwards. So, because the color sensor is useful when trying to detect colors on the ground. For example, when you want your robot to stop at a black line. I'm going to show you how to use your color sensor to stop, like I said, on a black line. Once again, the first thing we need to do is to get our robot moving. So we're going to get, this time I'm going to choose the move tank. I drag the move tank block out and attach it to the play button. And once again, like the other sensors, I turn the motors on. Now that the motors are on, I'm going to need to wait. I'm going to need the wait block because I'll be waiting for the color sensor this time. So the wait block again is in the orange tab and the one with the hourglass on it. I can drag the block out and attach it to the end of my program. Once again, I'm not waiting for time, but I'm going to wait for the color sensor. So I click the bottom left and I go to the color sensor, compare color. Now my wait block is waiting for the color sensor and it's a color red. I want to wait for the black line, so I'm going to click where there's that little 5 in the bracket. I'm going to click that, and you'll notice that there's a list of different colors we can choose from. I am going to choose the black line, and I do not want the red line. So I'm going to click on the 5 so that way the red is gone. So now in my program, my color sensor plug that's in on port 3 is going to be used to detect the black line. So from the beginning, we have move tank, which moves my robot forward for infinity while it's waiting for a color. And my color sensor is waiting to detect the black line. Once I detect the black line, now I need to stop the robot. So I go back to my action blocks in the green tab, and I pull out one of the moving blocks that controls 2 motors, and I turn it off by clicking the bottom left, and I hit off. So this is the program we can use for the color sensor. So one thing to note is that when you mount the color sensor on your robot, you want the color sensor to be within 0.5 to 1 centimeter off the ground. So that way it does not get interrupted and the color sensor, the detection of colors is most effective. So like we did for the other ones, I'll now give you a minute or two to test out this program on your robot and just press the play button, connect your robot, press the play button to try it out.
And unlike before, I am back. I apologize. I had some technical difficulties there, but I'm back. So here's your Jeopardy music. All right, that's a minute. So hopefully everybody's okay with that. It seemed pretty fast, but why don't we move on, Christy?
All right, so I believe right now, so what we've done so far is that we've done the move steering, the touch sensor, the ultrasonic sensor, and finally the color sensor. Now, if there are any questions, I believe we'd be open for questions now.
So once again, just to review, the process for Q&A is going to be that if you have a question, you can type it into the question box that is available to you there in your control panel for the GoToWebinar software. Or if you'd prefer to ask your question verbally, you can raise your hand. There's an electronic hand in the attendees section you should be able to do. And when you raise your hand, we'll see that and we can unmute you and you can ask your question that way. No questions right now. All right, I think that usually means, Christy, that you did a good job teaching. So do you want to go on to the next step then? We can review questions at the end again if anybody has any.
All right, so I'll now go back to my slide. Another feature that you can have on your EV3 brick is the port view. So this is found in once you get to the home back onto your home screen on the brick, if you go to the third tab, that is the brick apps, and you go down to the port view. Port view, once you open that, you'll have a screen similar to the one on the right. The top line here is for motors, and the bottom line for sensors. So on your robot, you would probably have a motor plugged in on the middle two. So that's B and C. This is useful when, for example, you don't know how far you want your robot to go. So if you wanted your robot to maybe turn to go like a certain distance, say 30 centimeters, but you don't know how many rotations, how many motor rotations that is, what you can do is inside the port view, you can, once you open port view, have your robot where you want it and gently push the robot, and then your motors will turn, and this will allow you to see how many rotations or how many degrees your motor needs to turn to accomplish that certain distance. Inside the port view, you can also take a look at the sensors. So the sensors are on the bottom, and for example, if the color sensor, you can see what color that the color sensor is reading just to check if the color sensor is accurate. You can also, for example, the touch sensor, you can see the numbers either 1 or 0 to show that if the touch sensor is pressed or released. If you look on the port number where you have your ultrasonic sensor, then over there you'll be able to see what's the distance and how far away an obstacle is from your robot.